Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. It is the final day in the Allianz National Football League this weekend. The final round of fixtures, round 7. We'll be finding out who's going to get promoted, who's going to get relegated, and everything else in between as well. Joined here by Seamus Brady from On Clare for this one to preview all the weekend's GA action. We'll be looking at the hurling semi-finals a little bit later on as well towards the end of the video. But for now, we're going to focus on the football because Seamus, final day of the National Football League. It's always a bit of a mental day, always a little bit crazy and everything else when you're seeing all the scores and everything come in. And there's been a few famous final days in the National Football League down the years when it comes to promotion and relegation and everything else. So, yeah, doesn't feel like maybe there's as much on the line this weekend. I feel like there's a lot of things that's actually already been settled, but at the same time, it's going to be interesting across all 4 divisions, seeing how things unfold.
Certainly will, Aaron, and thanks for having me on again on the show. Looking forward to this. There's still things at stake across all 4 divisions. So, like Division 1, you have Roscommon, Galway, that, one of them is going to go down. Division 2, you obviously have Fermanagh, Louth, one of them is going to go down. Division 3, it's going to be Wicklow or Offaly that go down. There's still a lot to go on there. And then Clare, as you have in your title, Clare could pip down into the promotion places, which at something at the start of the league that just 3-4 games in seemed unimaginable. Clare have been quietly smashing it ever since their defeat to Westmeath, especially when you consider the 11 players that walked away, that Colm Collins, everything like that. But we'll get into that later on. They've done a smashing job. Division 4 as well is, been the most competitive division out of the lot for who goes up. You have 3 teams all on 8 points on the final day, like that. Any of them could go up. You've got Leitrim, who you correctly predicted would completely, give themselves a massive boost by beating Laois. I didn't see that coming. You did. Leitrim have shot themselves into the promotion places now, and Longford and Wexford are there too, and they're playing against each other. So for Leitrim, they'll be keeping a close eye on that, hoping for a draw. And then maybe then they can nip into the top 2 places because they're hosting Tipperary at Páirc Sean McDermott. You'd imagine they'd win that with everything that's at stake. So yeah, something on the line across all 4 divisions. There's nothing more you can ask for on the final day.
Absolutely, and especially Division 4, which we'll get onto a little bit later. There's some absolute crackers on display there, and there's so many permutations. But I suppose we'll start with Division 1, and this is how Division 1 looks going into the final games this weekend. So as we can see, Derry and Dublin are both in the places to advance to the National Football League final as it stands. But you do have Kerry there with 8 points. They're playing Galway, and Dublin are playing Terron. So really does go down to how both of those get on. You do have Terron, Mayo, who there is a slight chance that either one of them could end up in the league final, but even with score difference and everything else, it is probably very unlikely. And then looking down relegation, Monaghan we know are already relegated, and it goes down to Roscommon and Galway, of course, going into their final matches. And I suppose we'll start with Roscommon because they play Derry away from home. I suppose first of all, Roscommon need to win to give themselves any chance to stay up in the National Football League. Obviously, with the fact that there is the case of Galway taking on Kerry. What do you reckon? Can Roscommon pull off the great escape? Do they have a chance this weekend?
It's a massively, massively difficult task because I think if you pull back up the table there, just real quick, I think Derry are on 10 points if memory's correct. Yeah, Derry are on 10. So again, there's a possibility that... Is there a possibility that Derry don't make it into the league final?
There could be a possibility if Dublin and Kerry both finish on 10 points, it will go down to score difference. Now, looking at it there, with the points difference, that's a big gap that Derry have there. So unless Dublin were to give Derry an absolute maul and then Kerry were to give Galway an absolute thumping, which I couldn't really see happening either, just with the fact that it's the final day. Roscommon were to give Derry an absolute thumping, and then Dublin were to win by a high margin as well. So yeah, it's unlikely, but it's not impossible, I suppose.
Yeah, and just because it's not impossible, I think Derry will put out a relatively strong team. I think just because Derry aren't fully there, like they have basically 1 foot over the finish line into a Division 1 final, but just because it's not fully guaranteed, they're definitely not going to roll over for Roscommon and go, okay, well we're safe. So, so that makes it so difficult for Roscommon, because if you've slipped up against teams that have been beaten fairly handy by Derry, then how are you going to go away to Derry and beat them? It's a very, very difficult task. Only one team has managed to beat Derry in the entire league, and that team beat Roscommon fairly handy in Croke Park. That was Dublin. It's a massively difficult task for Roscommon, and like my gut instinct is telling me no. I don't think that they can do it. I think it's too much to ask that they go up to Celtic Park and beat Derry in their own backyard, when Derry have been taking every game super serious. Like, I know personally I didn't buy that whole, oh well we rested Conor Glass against Dublin, therefore we would have beaten Dublin if he was there. Dublin were missing more players than Derry were. Like, let's have that right. Like, Mannion wasn't there, Pascal wasn't there, McCarthy wasn't there, McCaffrey wasn't there, McFitz wasn't there, Cluxton wasn't there. But anyway, back to Roscommon. Roscommon, the scary thing when you're watching is they don't actually have a lot of lads to come back. They don't actually, like, Kieran Murtha's not coming back, Ultan Harney's not coming back. So this is what they've got. And if it's relegation out of Division 1, it'd be hard to see them bounce back immediately out of Division 2, because Cavan have made massive strides. You got Meath there who have turned around, Cork who have turned around. The Division 2 will be difficult to get out of next season, and you have Down as well and Westmeath, or Clare potentially in there too. It's not going to be an easy division. So Roscommon, how they perform this weekend will tell me everything that I need to know about their future prospects. There's a way to lose. I think it's possible that they win, but I don't think it's possible that they win by enough to save themselves, because Galway are on 5 points. And like, at the time we were talking about just how important was that victory for Galway against Terron. It was massive, and we'll go into that in more detail like when we come to that game. But like, Roscommon in this game, something just, I can't see them doing it. It's too much to go away to Derry and beat them. They might beat them by a point or two, but I don't think it'll be enough that they can then override Galway's score difference advantage, unless Galway get thumped by Kerry. There's a road there, but it's unlikely. I think Derry will probably beat Roscommon by a point or two, and then that will be that.
Yeah, like, and even because even the score difference as well, like just having a look at it here, like the score difference, like there's a 3-point swing looking at the score difference. So it could be possible if Galway lose and Roscommon were to win, that they overtake them. But at the same time,
what are the exact figures? What are Roscommon on? What are Galway on?
So if we have a look here again, if we look at the points difference, Roscommon are -10 and Galway are -13. So and obviously both sides drew when they played each other as well. So there's obviously no head-to-head there with either side. So like, and if Galway were to lose, they're obviously going to lose by 1 or 2 points. 1 point, let's say Roscommon win by a point. That's the only way maybe Galway might survive in the case that Roscommon win. But even at that, I suppose it'd be unlikely. But like as Keane is saying here, I can see Roscommon shocking Derry lads. I would kind of agree with yourself though, Seamus. Like, I do think it'd be very hard for Roscommon to go to Derry. I do think Derry might rotate players. I do think they might rest players. With the
I'd
fact
back
that
it though if Derry weren't the type to take every game seriously.
They
were putting out everybody they had in the McKenna Cup.
Yeah.
Like, the only lads that were missing in the McKenna Cup was the Glen boys. And in the minute that was done, the Glen boys were back in. So I can't see them taking this game lightly. They never do. If you were telling me that it was Mayo at the top or Dublin at the top, teams that sometimes have a tendency to take games off, Derry don't. Derry don't take games off. Like, I think Derry treat this as any other game, and the objective is to win. And I think that they will. And I think it's just a little bit too far out.
Yeah, like I could see 1 or 2 players maybe being rested. I could see maybe Brendan Rodgers maybe being rested. I could see maybe Chrissy McKay coming out. Maybe Shane McGuigan comes out. But at the same time, I could still see Derry playing with the same intensity. I think the fresher players who've come into the team have proved enough. There's an air of confidence about them. They're at home. And I think they will want to keep that momentum going into what would be a possible league final against Dublin, maybe against Kerry. But I think either way, from a Derry perspective, momentum will be key, because obviously Donegal is not too far away as well in the Ulster Championship, in fairness. So you're going for what, in terms of margin of victory? What would you
I say, no, this is what I'm talking about when I say that there's a way to go down. Like, the way that Donegal went down last season, I would say, is not the way to go down. Roscommon battered them on the last day, and Donegal went down with a whimper. And I think if McGuinness hadn't came in, I think that they were on a declining path. That's why McGuinness came back, was so crucial to Donegal football, because he turned that around. Like, they were on a downward trajectory, and the way that they went down didn't fill me with confidence that they could come straight back up. If Roscommon go down fighting, then I wouldn't be fearful for them in the championship, and I wouldn't be fearful for them of what next season will bring. But if they get slapped up by Derry, if they go down off the back of a 10-point defeat or something like that, I would be slightly worried for what the next couple of years would look like in terms of progress. Because it's one thing to lose and to go down by the narrowest of margin and go, you can look yourself honestly in the mirror and go, do you know what, we lost by a point. Certain situations, if we had a beaten Galway in round 2, when we had the opportunity, we could have stayed up. We can stay up. We can compete in Division 1. But if you go down after you got your ass handed to you, it's difficult to build back that belief that you can compete with those lads when you were shown just how far off you were the last time you tried.
Absolutely. David says here, Derry definitely take the foot off the gas against Dublin. There was 7 changes to the team that started against Kerry. Yeah, I don't think anyone's disputing that. I think just the point that we were making is just that Dublin had multiple players obviously missing for that game as well. But yeah, you could see Derry, take their foot, because the thing is, with the amount of intense games coming up potentially for Derry, there is the possibility that they do rest players for this game. If there was a game where you can rest players, I think this is the one, because I don't buy into Derry resting players in a league final like that. Just because if you were to get beaten comfortably by Dublin in a league final, like, you're going into that Donegal game with no momentum whatsoever. I think you'd much rather beat Dublin with your strongest team in the final, or Kerry, or whoever it may be, and then you go into that Ulster Championship sort of raring with confidence and raring to go. And to be fair, yeah, I agree with you. I think they will beat Roscommon. I'm going to say by 2 points. I've got a feeling Roscommon, Derry will probably manage a 5-6 point lead throughout the match. And then for the final 10-15 minutes, I think Derry's focus will start to shift a little bit. Roscommon will go full, hammer and tongs for the final couple of minutes, and they might get a goal, make it interesting. But I do fancy Derry to just about hang on and get the victory. Would you fancy Dublin to join them in the league final at home to Terron? Obviously, Terron have nothing to play for at this point. As we're saying, if we look at the league table again, there's a small, minute chance that Terron could end up in a league final, and that would be if Terron beat Dublin. And then obviously there was enough of a point swing, but you're looking at the point swing there, like Dublin are plus 28. So I think
would have to batter them.
Yeah, you'd be talking like a 30-point victory or something like that. And then obviously you'd be relying on Kerry to lose and their points difference swing as well. But Dublin at home to Terron in Croke Park with the form that the Dubs are in, can you see anything other than a Dublin win?
Not really, to be honest. Dublin have definitely turned a corner since the Roscommon game. It was the thing that we were talking about there, that I still don't even think we played necessarily badly in the Monaghan game, and we didn't have the worst game against Mayo as well. 2 defeats, but it was games where if you look back on them, you could say, do you know what, if we did this couple of things differently, we would have won those games. Whereas 2022, when we went down, we were outclassed by Armagh in round 1, and we were way off against Kerry in round 2. And that's why when you looked at it, you were thinking, God, we don't have anything to cling on to there that can tell us that our form is going to turn around. I think you got the feeling that if we beat Roscommon, our league would go up, and if we lost to Roscommon, we'd be staring relegation in the face. That Roscommon game was where the good work was done to turn it around. You got your feet under the table, you got to win. And in the Kerry game, obviously, absolutely took off from there. Great victory against Kerry, and then to beat Derry away from home is, in some people's eyes, even more impressive, because Derry have been, have been seen as untouchable nearly in Division 1 so far. And it was a game that Dublin had lost last season in Division 2 as well, that exact same game, and lost in dramatic circumstances. And then to beat Galway as well, like, Dublin have definitely turned the corner. It's back in Croke Park. And having seen just how up for it Dublin looked against Kerry, and how well their forward line was clicking together, and how well the moves were going, yeah, I only see Dublin winning this game. Terron, like, as you said, last week they ensured their survival. They have nothing left to play for. I don't think then that naturally you would think that they wouldn't have the same, grit, bite down on the gum shield, we need to get this win type of energy. Dublin actually have more to play for than Terron. Dublin have the opportunity to make a league final. Dublin have the opportunity to absolutely put a stamp on it that they're going to be facing Derry in that league final. And how good a return it would be to Division 1 football to go back to back, to win Division 2 and then come back up to Division 1 and win that as well. It would be a perfect, return to the top flight. So I don't think Dublin will turn down that opportunity. I think Terron will put up a good test. I can see it being a really enjoyable game of Gaelic football to watch. Like, you've got Conor O'Callaghan in the form of his life at one end, and you've got Dara Canavan in the form of his life at the other. That's going to be a joy to watch in itself. But I can see Dublin winning by about 3 or 4 points in what would be an enjoyable game of Gaelic football.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, especially with Terron coming in, as you said, like that win versus Monaghan, Dara Canavan in the form of his life, Darren McCurry obviously coming back in, and when he has come back in, he's been absolutely brilliant. Could Terron maybe spoil the party? They do love spoiling the party at Croke Park, in fairness.
They definitely could. Like, they have the forwards. There's no question about it. Like, Canavan is absolutely unbelievable. We're waiting for Rory now to
player
hit
of the league so far, do you think? Dara Canavan? Player of the league so far?
Definitely. As far as I'm concerned, definitely. Like, how many man the matches has he won? 3?
I think so, yeah.
3 man the matches, and not only that, but he's very much single-handedly, it's felt at times, led Terron to vital victories. Like Roscommon in the opening day, Canavan felt like he was the difference maker in that game. He got the crucial goal against Mayo. He got an outrageous goal against Monaghan as well. And look, Darren McCurry has been absolutely fantastic as well. And McCurry is very underrated for what he does. Like, McCurry is pretty much a guaranteed 5 points, 4 points every game he plays. So I think having him is going to be crucial alongside Dara Canavan, because it allows Dara to, a little bit more freedom to do his thing, because McCurry needs an eye kept on him as well. Rory Canavan, we're waiting to see him at his best. Colin McShane coming back in, Maddie Donnelly coming back in. Like, all of a sudden for Terron now, it's starting to shape up nicely. I do think that they are still far off what would be their best panel. I think they're still really missing the likes of Conor McKenna and Niall Sludd and Ronan Mack. That obviously Sludd and Mack are retired. They're not coming back, but McKenna would be a huge asset to have him back if he was to come back from the AFL. It's not going to happen. But I feel like they got hit so hard with all those players leaving, and now they've kind of built together a new team with the likes of Ben Cullen and the likes of Shawnee O'Donnell and Niall Devlin. And we've seen this year that they're good enough in their first year playing together as very much a new team, that we've seen that they're good enough to stay in Division 1. So it bodes well for future years.
Yeah, no, I think there is a lot more positivity about Terron ending the league this year than the last couple of years, I think. Especially with some of their performances, the age profile of some of their players just, tickling along quite nicely. Some of them now coming into their prime, as well as some of the more experienced players definitely stepping up. Gaelic Football Pro says Dublin are going to go for this win to see us in the league final. Prediction: Dublin 117, Terron 114. Yeah, I'd probably go with a 4-point win for Dublin. What would you think?
Yeah, 4-point win for Dublin. I'm going to back it exactly. I think a very enjoyable game. As I said, I'm predicting it will be a very, very enjoyable game of Gaelic football. Canavan at one end, Conor O'Callaghan at the other. Very open, expansive attacking football, but I think Dublin will shade it by 3 or 4 points.
There we go. There we go. Kerry versus Galway is up next. A lot of rumours that Kerry are apparently going down with a second team and everything else. But again, Twitter is never a reliable source, so you don't know if you can believe it or not. Galway, though, on the other hand side, like they do still need something from this in the case that Roscommon were to beat Derry. So big game for Galway, and I suppose Kerry, you know, they might have one eye on the their Dublin versus Terron game potentially as well. But what would you expect for this one? Sort of an interesting game, isn't it? Because if this game's in Championship, you'd be really looking forward to it. But there's just a lot of unknowns about this game a little bit, because it could be a very meaningless game if other results go certain ways.
Do you know what it kind of has the feeling of? It kind of has the feeling of, like, do you remember? It's very different, but it's like, do you know when, like, Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. had like the boxing match years after, they had like an exhibition bout. It's like, on paper it's a cracker, like Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr., but like they got in there and just kind of danced around each other a little bit and had a move about. Kerry and Galway could do that. They could just roll out teams that aren't at the best. You would imagine Galway would be way closer to their best because they've got a hell of a lot to fight for and a hell of a lot to worry about should Roscommon beat Derry. I don't expect. I still would be surprised though if we see Comer, because we haven't seen him in the entire league. It would be definitely come of the hour, come of the man type stuff. Comer could be brought in. Walsh might be too. Very, very difficult to know kind of where his fitness is at, because Galway have used him so sparingly in the league. They used him, as much as ever at the start of the league, and then just dropped off. Like Kerry, on the other hand, I don't buy this that they're not going in with any of their best players. Like, I don't buy that at all, because they have right in front of them a potential league final. If Dublin slip up against Terron, there's a league final there for them. Dublin have a history of slipping up at Croke Park against Ulster teams. Like Monaghan this year is a case. Armagh 2022 is a case. Like, they have a history of slipping up against Ulster teams in Croke Park. So if Dublin do slip up and it's a draw, well, then Kerry are into a league final.
Yeah.
The question is, does Jack O'Connor want that? Does he want a league final? And I think his team selection will tell us everything we need to know. If Kerry go out there, regardless of what he says, if Kerry go out there and they've rested the Cliffords and they've rested Shawnee O'Shea, he doesn't give a shit about the league. There's a league final right there for you, potentially, if Dublin slip up, which could happen. And if you go out there without playing your best players, it means that you're not willing to put everything into this game to try and make a league final. And I think very much in GA circumstances, you either care or you don't. Like, I don't buy this. You can't half care about the competition. You don't half care about winning the All-Ireland, half care about winning the league. You either care about it or you don't. And like, because the teams that are putting more into it are the teams that always come out on top. Like, Derry have been going for the league from the get-go, and I'm not saying that is the reason why they're up there, but the reality is they got beaten by Dublin and they got beaten by Kerry in last year's All-Ireland semi-final in a cracking game, yet Derry are above both of them. So because they've been going for it from the get-go, Derry would not have slipped up at the way that Dublin slipped up against Monaghan.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for Kerry because, like, especially going into the Munster Championship, I think it's similar a little bit with Dublin in the sense that Kerry don't need. I know they've had a few scares off Cork in the last couple of years, but generally speaking, Kerry don't have to be 100% throughout the Munster Championship. Like, the only team really they need to worry about a little bit is Cork, but even at that, I think Kerry, have more than enough to beat Cork. I think we all know that. So I think, there's a bit of a gap between like Munster Championship and then the group stages as well. So I think for Kerry, and when you look at it, like when Kerry won the All-Ireland last in 2022, they won the league, and they got to the league final, played a huge amount of games, obviously in the league. They were going as strong as they could for a lot of those games, and then they went on and won the league final. So I think for Kerry, like, I can't see them rotate. I mean, they might rotate a little bit, but I'd agree with what you say. Like, I think there is a league final there potentially if Dublin were to slip up. I think Kerry at home, in Clarny or wherever it is, I would think they'd be too strong for Galway, especially as you said, Walsh and Comer haven't featured too often for Galway this year. I can't see them featuring in this game. It just wouldn't make sense to throw them in for this. Maybe they might be on the bench. You come in the last 10, 15 minutes if you need it. They'll obviously have one eye on what's happening between Derry and Roscommon as well. But I could see, I could see this being a very similar game to the Dublin Galway game. To be honest with you, I could see Kerry probably winning 2-3, maybe 4, maybe towards the end. Galway make a bit of a push to make it a little bit of a less, a bit more of a smaller scoreline. But I could still see Kerry being relatively comfortable with the victory.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you. I think Kerry will do enough to win this game because they do have their eye on, well, if Dublin slip up, we could get into a league final. But again, I don't think they'll see it as the end of the world if they don't. I think they know that they have a lot to work on, because what O'Connor will keep his eye on more than anything out of the league is the Dublin game. Like you can argue about, well, they had great wins, had great wins over Mayo, and they had a great win over Terron and everything like that. Yes, they did. But the reality is when they went to Croke Park and they played against a team that stopped them winning the All-Ireland last year, they looked further away from Dublin than I've seen them in a long, long time. And I know that that's the league, and, you don't get overhyped with it, and you don't think that the All-Ireland is wrapped up now. It's definitely far from that. But the league is a pretty good omen for, whereabouts you might be in terms of your preparation, in terms of the team morale, in terms of the camp, everything like that. It's a little window into it, and obviously that can change. But the point is that game is a showcasing of that Kerry need to change some stuff. We're not saying that they can't, but they do need to change those stuff. And if it gets to the end of the year and Dublin are to play Kerry in Croke Park again, which could well happen, Kerry better have their homework done on what Dublin's attacking, plan was, because it sliced Kerry open time and time again in the league game this year. So if Dublin are coming with that again, Kerry have to be ready for it. I think that they will win this game, Kerry. I think that the difference maker between Galway and Roscommon, and I touched on it when we were talking about the Derry Roscommon game, is that victory in Terron. And it felt massive at the time. It felt massive. Like Johnny Heaney's performance that day was absolutely fantastic. A real captain's performance. And it felt huge that day that Galway got over the line, because it felt like that's a game that you needed to get your points from, and you got your points from it, and you got them without Walsh, without Comer, and you still found a way to win that game. And that was, to be honest, one of the reasons why I thought Terron would go down, because I thought the same thing about Terron. I thought Terron need to win that game against Galway, and they lost it. I thought that was tailor-made for Terron to win. I think that game could be the difference. I think Galway and Roscommon will both lose tight games, but Galway's victory over Terron will be what has made the difference.
Yeah, I think so as well. I'd have to go with Kerry by 3 or 4. And anyone who's tuning in, let us know in the comments down below, or even live right now. Who do you think will come out on top in the meeting between Kerry and Galway? Last game in Division 1, obviously a meaningless game in terms of the league table. Monaghan already relegated, Mayo already safe. Again, you don't really know what's going to happen with this game. What type of team are Mayo going to put in for this, especially with the fact they obviously play New York in a couple of weeks' time. Monaghan, obviously, I'm sure will now, their attention will most certainly start to turn towards the Ulster Championship. I've got a feeling Monaghan might turn up for this and win this one. Just the fact it's at Clonus, I suppose the fact that the pressure is off them now ever so slightly. They're relegated. They can play with a bit more freedom. They don't have that tag over them. What do you reckon? How could you see this going?
I could see it actually going similar to how you just said it. The shackles are off Monaghan now. They have had that kind of almost. I remember watching the Premier League growing up, and it was Wigan Athletics, for example, that they did 3 or 4 years where they stayed up against all odds in a row until they were eventually caught. But it's Monaghan, for example, were like this. Everybody was waiting for them to kick on this season, and they just never did. And I think there was a couple of games where they lost in games that I was thinking, okay, this is the one where Monaghan turn up. So like Roscommon, say for example, I was like, okay, this is the one that Monaghan win, and it proves to be vital later on. And they got slapped up by Roscommon, and then they had Galway at home next, and I was thinking, okay, Galway, and then Mayo on the last day. That's how Monaghan stay up, and then Galway beat them quite comfortably as well. And wasn't expecting that, and especially because it was in Clonus. And like, what's funny as well is that last year Monaghan stayed up on the final day, and the team that they beat to stay up on the final day was Mayo. Like, so I was like, no way is history going to repeat itself. And unfortunately, for Monaghan's sake, it's not going to repeat itself. Even if they win, they are going down. Mayo don't have anything to play for either. They will, have the New York game on their mind. I could see both teams. I could see it being an enjoyable enough game of Gaelic football, like not too much on the line. And I agree with you. I think because of the lack of pressure, the lack of do or die consequences in this game, I think Monaghan will throw the shackles off a bit. We might see some vintage Stephen O'Hanlon, some vintage, Conor McManus, and we might see a Monaghan win by 2 or 3 points, which would be in some ways a perfect, send off from Division 1 until they return, which we know that they will at some point. It's a question of when rather than if. But for this run in Division 1, it's been an extraordinary run of success.
Absolutely, yeah. And look, Mayo are certainly a quality team, and most certainly if they play their best stuff, they could very well come away with a win. Do think there might be an element of rotation with Mayo and everything else, because again, speaking with a few different Mayo fans over the last week, like Mayo, if there is an unlikely scenario where they end up in a league final as well. If they end up in that league final, they then travel to New York literally a couple of days later. So I just think Mayo is certainly a team that I'd imagine would not want that league final. So you could see a good amount of rotation in preparation for the championship to come in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, I think I'll go with a Monaghan win there as well. Moving on to Division 2, this is how things look here. So Armagh and Donegal are both already promoted with 11 points, so there's nothing to decide in terms of promotion. But certainly at the other end of the table, that is where it is still very much up for grabs. Kildare are relegated with 6 defeats from 6, but Fermanagh and Louth still have it all to play for. Obviously, Louth beat Fermanagh quite convincingly last weekend, so they'll certainly be the front runners. And speaking of Louth, they do travel to their rivals Kildare. Kildare have had 6 defeats in a row. I suppose in some ways, maybe the pressure might be off a little bit here with Kildare as well. I was listening to Glenn Ryan speaking on Off the Ball, at full time and everything else, and he was saying, there's a bit of relief maybe around Kildare now. They can sort of park this. The relegation thing has been looming over them for a certain period of time, over the last couple of weeks. So maybe this might help them. But in saying that, after Louth putting in such a convincing win against Fermanagh, yeah, it's mad. I can't remember another game more recently between Kildare and Louth where Louth have been overwhelming favourites. And the game, obviously it's not home for Kildare because it's in Carlow, but it's not in Louth either. So yeah, Louth are massive favourites and you would expect them to win.
I don't know, man. I think that that's a bit of a silly comment from Glenn Ryan to be like, oh well, it's a relief now that we're relegated. Like, I know that maybe that's slightly out of context, but
weight off the shoulders, I think.
Yeah.
Is what he meant.
Yeah. No. Like, kind of probably took that the wrong way a little bit, but I was like, I look at it and think there's absolutely no planet that Kildare should be in Division 3.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, for the resources, and I remember seeing the money that has been pumped into Kildare in comparison to other counties. Like, there's clearly somewhere in the chain, and we've spoken about this before, there's clearly somewhere in the chain where it doesn't work anymore. There's something there that is just there's something there that needs rid of. There's something there that needs shifting, because the players are there. We know that. No Daniel Flynn, like Kevin Feely, like Kevin Flynn, Mick O'Grady, Jimmy Hyland, Derek Kirwan. Like, these fellas are, good enough to be in any county panel in the country. I do genuinely believe that. I think Kevin Feely, Daniel Flynn at their best are 2 of the best footballers in the country. Then you have like James McGrath and players like that coming through the under-20s. Like he was the under-20 footballer of the year last year. Then you have, 2 All-Ireland under-20 titles in 23 and in 18. And then in the 22 season, they made it to the final. So the underage structures are there. And then you have your legends on the sideline coaching you. So, and we were saying this on previous episodes, if you're a Kildare footballer and you won't get up for a game for Glenn Ryan, there's nobody that you'll get up for a game for. Because he's one of the biggest legends to ever pull on a Kildare jersey. He was an absolutely colossal player at centre half back for Kildare on their run to the 98 All-Ireland final. He captained them to a Leinster title in 2000. He is an absolute titan in Kildare football. And if he puts his arm around you and says, I need a game out of you, and you don't give it to him, there's nobody that can get it out of you then. So at some point, you're like, well, it's something that we can see that just doesn't click. It's either the group of players that there's something wrong in the culture, or the management isn't gelling, or the management doesn't gel with the players, or there's too many kind of head chefs in the kitchen there with, John Dull, Anthony Rainbow, and Glenn Ryan. Maybe they all want to be the main man. Like, something's not working. But then to see the Kildare County Board come out and say, look, we back Glenn Ryan, it's like, okay, well, at least they've come out and stated something on it and, nailed their colours to the mast and said, like, right, we're going to try and, find out why this isn't working in a sense. And look, there's no guarantees. There's no, royalties that say that Kildare get out of Division 3. Why should they? They've been losing to teams that came out of Division 3. They lost to Fermanagh. They lost to Cavan. What evidence do we have to say that they're going to bounce back? Westmeath didn't get out at the first time of asking. Cavan didn't get out. Cavan went down to Division 3 from Division 2 under Mickey Graham, and they got relegated to Division 4 immediately after. Derry went down to Division 3. They got relegated to Division 4 before they got promoted to Division 2. There's nothing that says that you have a divine right to go straight back up to Division 2. So Kildare have to be careful here. And they have to manage out the rest of this season well. And a victory against Louth, I think, would be a very good way to start. If you go down, fair enough. It's done now. There's nothing you can do about it. But if you go down with a victory, it makes it somewhat like, okay, you're not falling anymore. You're not falling like a stone. But if you lose all 7 games in Division 2, that looks horrific. And then to go into the, Tailteann Cup and everything like that, if you don't make the Leinster final, it's going to be a tough old year for Kildare, and they need to manage out the rest of it well. They need to start off with a victory here against Louth, and that could open the door to Fermanagh, which is the interesting thing about it, is that for Louth are the team that absolutely battered Fermanagh last week. Yet if Fermanagh win their game, I think Fermanagh are playing Cavan, and it's in Kingspan Breffni. If Fermanagh win that game and Louth lose, Fermanagh actually jump Louth and stay up, which would be unbelievable.
Yeah, that'd be wild, all right. Yeah, considering obviously Louth's win versus Fermanagh last week. But to be honest, I can't see anything other than a Louth win. In all honesty, and what's mad is that Kildare and Louth could actually potentially play each other in a couple of weeks' time in the Leinster Championship as well. They're on the same side of the draw, so there very well could be a potential. I think it might be a Leinster semi-final or something along them lines where Kildare and Louth could possibly play each other. If everything went that way. Obviously, Westmeath might have something to say about that as well. But yeah, I think for Kildare, they do have a few players maybe to come back in at some point. They probably have looked slightly better in the last couple of games than the opening couple of games in the league. But I just think for Louth, after beating Fermanagh as well as they did, the form that the likes of Samuel Roy, Kieran Keane and Kieran Downey are all coming in with, I couldn't see anything other than a Louth win. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think Louth definitely look like they're on a good string of form after the Fermanagh game. And what we saw as well is when Louth get a chance to beat someone, they really put them to the sword. They really put down a fair beating on Fermanagh. yeah, it's not in Kildare's home venue either. I know it's down as a Kildare home game, but it's not. It's a neutral venue. Yeah, I'll go with Louth to take this. And you're right. Like who would have thought? Like 6-7 years ago that you'd be here saying Louth are overwhelming favourites to beat Kildare.
Yeah, and it's not
even. Yeah, forget that. Even 2 years ago, man.
Yeah,
2 years ago when Kildare went down fighting out of Division 1. And Louth were in Division 4.
Yeah. It's mad. It's mad how quickly things can change. But yeah, anyone who's tuning in, do let us know. Yeah, your predictions for Kildare Louth. And yeah, if you could hit the like button and subscribe, that would be appreciated. Hit the notifications bell, all that stuff as well. Cavan Fermanagh. Cavan obviously have nothing to play for here. Fermanagh certainly have a lot to play for. Interesting enough, these two played each other last year on the final day in the league. Cavan were already promoted. Fermanagh weren't promoted, and Fermanagh then went and beat Cavan, and that was a result that saw them get over the line and get promoted back to Division 2. So could you see something similar happening? Cavan, nothing to play for. Fermanagh have it all to play for, and they do have a good record against Cavan in recent years.
Do you know what? Yeah, it's a pattern of Cavan. If you pay attention, like maybe it was just the Mickey Graham era, but it was a pattern of Cavans to completely drop the ball in one game, especially in the league. Like Cavan are the same. Cavan under Mickey Graham are the team that got promoted back to back from Division 4 to Division 3, winning the league both times. But they're also the team that got relegated back to back from Division 2 down to Division 4. They have crazy slip-ups in them. And last year was one of those slip-ups because, Fermanagh beat them, and that allowed Fermanagh to jump into the promotion places and go up to Division 2. And again, we're in a similar situation this year where Cavan have nothing to play for and Fermanagh have everything to play for. And there is a world where Fermanagh win this. I have a slight feeling, for some reason, that I could see a world in which Fermanagh beat Cavan, but Louth have already beaten Kildare, so it doesn't matter, and Fermanagh go down swinging. I feel like, I don't know, I think maybe a draw as well could be something on the cards, because I know that Fermanagh won't go down easy.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think the interesting point is Cavan took a fair hammering against Armagh last week, and they would certainly want to put that right before going into Ulster. They want a good result. I don't think it's quite the same as last year, where Cavan were in a league final anyway, so they had a game coming up that they needed to worry about. Whereas this time around, Cavan won't have a game coming up because they're not going to get promoted or relegated. So they're they're going to level off where they're already finishing basically. So you could see Cavan putting in a performance, but I do just have a feeling that Fermanagh are going to beat them. And as you said, I do expect Louth to win as well. So Fermanagh maybe getting relegated from Division 2 with 5 points. It's a little bit unfortunate, but I do think that's what's going to happen. And I can see them upsetting Cavan a little bit, maybe by a point or two. I just think Cavan's focus might shift now towards Ulster, and maybe Fermanagh will go in. But in saying that, Cavan, they will want to get a result. They will want to put in a performance, but I do just think Fermanagh will just about edge them. Last two games in Division 2, Donegal versus Meath and Cork versus Armagh. Two games that don't really have meaning in terms of the league table. Interesting enough, could be a scenario with the Tailteann Cup and everything, if Cork were to finish 6th and certain things were to happen in the championship and everything else. So maybe the team that does finish 6th could potentially end up in the Tailteann Cup, depending on what happens. But looking at it there, Donegal, Meath, Cork, Armagh, can you see anything other than the status quo in terms of Donegal being upset by Meath or Cork getting something against Armagh? I suppose both of those two sides are promoted, and I'm sure they will be, focused towards what the league final that will be coming up, and also the Ulster Championship.
Yeah, it's two extremely difficult games to call, to be honest, because as you said, there's nothing going on them. So it's impossible to sit here and say, how much are Donegal going to put into it? How much are Cork going to put into it? How much are Meath going to put into it? How much are Armagh going to put into it? I think Cork, I could actually see Cork getting something out of the Armagh game because it's in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. I think Donegal having home advantage against Meath, forget about it. Donegal, I think, win that game. I think just the journey in itself for me, to have to make that journey when you've nothing to play for, would be a difficult one to get up for enough that you can win it. I think Donegal will take that one. Armagh doing the flip of having to come down all the way to Páirc Uí Chaoimh, again, for a game that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. I could see Cork actually turning them over. Well, I'll go Cork and Donegal.
Yeah, I think I'm looking maybe at a draw for Cork Armagh. I still think even when Armagh rotated, they've still looked very good when they've brought fresher players in, and I have a funny feeling they'll introduce a few more fresher faces and they'll put in a performance. Saying that, Cork, even though they are even though they aren't getting relegated around like that, and they've no worries in regards to that, I do think there will still be an element of Cork wanting to keep that momentum going into the championship, and also with the slight possibility, if they were to finish sixth, that they could possibly end up in the Tailteann Cup. So there you go. Yeah, do you know, I'll go with a Cork win as well. I'll go with a Donegal win as well. I think, as you said, couldn't really see Donegal losing at home to Meath, even if they were to rest and rotate their team ever so slightly. Division 3 looks like this. So you've got Down and Westmeath both sitting in the promotion places with 11 points, but Clare very fresh on the tails of both of them there with 10 points. Sligo have nothing to play for with 7 points, and they won't be. They will stay in the 4th position when the league finishes up. Antrim, Offaly, Wicklow, all still in with a chance of getting relegated. They're certainly not out of it. Limerick, unfortunately, though, are already relegated. So there'll be no way they can survive. Certainly the big one in Division 3 is Down versus Clare. As we were saying before, Clare have a massive opportunity to bounce straight back up, which nobody would have expected at the start of the year, considering the amount of players that Clare lost. Down have been, free flowing at the best of times. They are unbeaten, but quite incredibly, they're not promoted just yet because of the big sort of lopsided nature there is in this division. Can Clare do it? Can they go to Park Esler, beat Down? And I suppose it would certainly be a memorable promotion if they could pull it off.
Oh, it'd be absolutely huge if they can pull this off. Like, it reminds me a lot of the victory over Cork last year in the Munster Championship, which guaranteed that they would play Sam Maguire football. Like, just when you wrote them off for good after relegation, just when you wrote them off, they come back with a crucial clutch victory to send themselves into the Sam Maguire Cup again for another year. This game is massive. Like, it's absolutely huge. And first things first, massive credit has to go to Mark Fitzgerald. Like, Clare were hit so hard in the off season. Like, 11 of those players gone, and not just any 11, but like Owen Cleary, Keelan Sexton, Jamie Malone, Cathal O'Connor, Keane O'D, like genuine crucial players for Clare, over the last 5-6 seasons. And then Colin Collins as well, the manager, gone. Like, literally the guy who was, the longest serving manager in the inter-county football game, before he stepped away. It was absolutely massively difficult for Clare to come back from that, yet they have found a way back. And Mark Fitzgerald in his new boss has done fantastic. Players like Aaron Griffin and Emmett McMahon have really stepped up. And if they can find a way to win against Down and Páirc Esler, it's an extraordinary achievement to get promoted back up to Division 2. It's absolutely extraordinary. It's the perfect showdown. It's like they've got to the final boss, isn't it? Like, they've got to the team that have been tearing up the division, bar the Westmeath draw. And let's be honest, Aaron, they threw that game away against Westmeath. They were 4 points clear in the 42nd minute. That's usually a situation where Down closed the game out. And they didn't. They let Westmeath come back in and dominate it. They will be looking back at that last game, kicking themselves a little bit. And the reality is Down last season started off brilliantly and massively tailed off at the end with the Tailteann Cup. In the Tailteann Cup final, against Meath. I know that they had the amazing semi-final against Laois where they scored 8 goals. But against Meath, they were beaten by them in Parnell Park in the group stage, and you thought that they'd rectify that and get them back in the final. That's what I thought. And Meath just had their number again. So Down have the tendency to let things slip a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see if Clare can catch them. Clare definitely have the belief, and they are flying high with that underdog confidence that they got nothing to lose. Nobody's expecting them to go up. Everybody knows about the players that, the 11 players that they've lost from their panel on the offseason. Everybody knows that Colin Collins, it's his first year stepping away. Everybody knows it's a new manager in. So they do have nothing to lose. And it will be an extraordinary achievement if they can pull it off. To beat down a Park Esler, to beat the team in Division 3 that have been absolutely smashing it from the get-go. And then on top of that, one thing we have to consider is if Down beat Clare and Clare miss out on promotion, we are going to have to look back at that square ball decision in the Westmeath game, because that could prove incredibly costly to Clare if Westmeath go up instead of them because of that decision.
It certainly could, all right. And unfortunately, Clare do seem to have been on the wrong end of some big decisions over the past sort of year and a half or whatever. And again, it could be massive. Down at home though in Park Esler, like as you said, like they are a young enough team, and they've had a lot of under 20 lads come in the last year. So Conor Laverty himself is still a relatively new coach, especially at this level. So maybe there was an air of naivety about them or inexperience against Westmeath in terms of throwing that game away. But at home against Clare, I mean, especially with the form that they have been in, you feel like if Down play their own football, play their own stuff, and don't think too much about promotion, don't just focus on their own stuff, they have what it takes to get over the line. But as you said, there could be an air of inexperience, maybe ever so slightly, about this downside, and maybe that might just lean Clare to make a final push. Because if this is 2 or 3 points going into the final, 3, 4, 5 minutes, I could definitely see a scenario where Clare get a late goal and nick it, because number one, Down have shown their inexperience quite a little bit in terms of being in this scenario. And Clare, albeit fair enough, they've lost a good group of players, but for the players who are still there and the younger players who are there, they know they've been here before and they've been able to dig out these types of results in the past.
Yeah, they have, and like that mentality does seep into the team. Like I know the likes of Owen Cleary and all have stepped away, but players like Emmett McMahon and Aaron Griffin and like Ike Maguire and all, they're just going to be like, well, we're going to step up then, I guess. Like, you know what I mean? Like they've stepped into the void. Clare have only lost one of their games to Westmeath, and it was a very, very controversial way in which they lost. And if they hadn't lost that game, we'd all be talking about Clare. Like they've been fantastic in their Division 3 campaign. Westmeath and Down have just, been more eye-catching in terms of the fact that they had the 100% record. But the fact that they drew with each other has thrown everything out of proportion now, because Clare could jump them. And the crazy thing is that if Clare win this game, it's just absolutely mind-blowing to think that they have managed to pull it back when they lose, so many critical arteries from their team. And I do agree with you, because if you look at the Tailteann Cup final, the last 10 minutes, when the game was there to be won, who kicked on? It wasn't Down that kicked on. It was Meath that kicked on. And Clare have the same grit and determination built into them. It's why they kicked on against Cork last year in the Munster Championship. When the game was there to be won, they found a way to win it. It was why they were able to stay up in Division 2 against the odds so many times under Colin Collins. That mentality is bred into these lads. So even though they're missing those 11 lads that were leaders in the team, they still have that belief that they can stay up. And as I said, they're coming with that underdog mentality, that they got nothing to lose. If they don't get promoted this year, no one's going to be mad at them, because everybody knows how hard they were hit in the off season. But if they get promoted over the team like Down that everybody's talking about, and everybody says that Down were reminding them of Derry a couple of years ago, if they beat Down in their own backyard and go up, it's an extraordinary achievement. And Mark Fitzgerald, who already deserves enormous credit, by the way, his stock will just go through the roof. And I have a funny feeling that they're going to do it. I think it's something that I can't shake. It's just like, and look, it's nervous, because I'm thinking that maybe this goes in the end of year worst predictions video or something. Like, I think it's one of those that Clare will either nick this or Down will win it by 5 or 6 points.
Yeah, I kind of have a feeling Clare do it as well. But at the same time, I think Down do have the quality there To be honest, I have a funny feeling this game, and I hate to say it, and I know any Clare Down fans watching this won't want me to say this, but I feel like it's going to be a draw. I feel like it's going to literally go right down to the wire, and you're hoping there's no controversy or anything like that, but I could see.
I think it has controversy written all over it. It's going to be
I just have
controversial
a
because of the square
feeling
ball.
something could happen in this game. You know?
Oh, it's hard to call, man. I don't want to be boring and say down. I just have a sneaky feeling Clare are going to do it. You know what? I'm going to go with Clare by a point.
There we go. I'm going to go for a draw, which keeps down in the promotion places. But I really do think it's going to go right down to the wire, and I think it's going to be there for Clare. I'm going to say that it's going to be there, but I just have a feeling Down are just about going to nick it. Of course, Westmeath, they're not promoted just yet. Obviously, they're playing Sligo. There could be a scenario where they lose, and if Clare were not to win, then they will be promoted. Sligo have nothing to play for. You would fancy Westmeath to do it. Sligo away from home, I think, have been a tricky place to go to, but you would fancy Westmeath to do enough in whatever way to still get promoted here.
Yeah, I probably would. I think there's a scenario in which Westmeath don't go up, isn't there? I think if Down lose to Clare and if Westmeath lose to Sligo, Westmeath don't go up.
Yes, I think so. Let's look at Division 3 again. So yeah, if Down were to lose, and yeah, Clare were to win, yeah, that absolutely spot on. Yeah, because it would then go down to score difference. So there is a scenario where Westmeath could go down potentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that they'll risk it. I think Westmeath will go fairly all out for this game. I think we'll see all the big guns in Heslin, O'Toole, McCartan. I think we'll see them all. I do back Westmeath to get this victory. Sligo have had a good league campaign. They've definitely, recovered well from the opening day defeat to Clare. They've been very, very solid. Players like Niall Murphy, Pat Spillane, they've been good. But I think this game is Westmeath's.
Yeah, I think so as well. Offaly, Limerick. Obviously, both of the two, Limerick already relegated. Offaly not out of the woods just yet, but they do know that a draw, even a draw, should be enough. But what do you reckon at home against Limerick? I mean, you saw what they done against Wicklow, when they played another side in around relegation zone. So you would fancy Offaly.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fairly similar. I think Offaly will actually take this game pretty easily. I'm going to go Offaly by about 10. I think if Offaly, it's funny how the fixtures, facing Offaly had a lot of the more difficult games early on. I feel like if Offaly had Limerick and Wicklow in the first 3 or 4 rounds, it could have been like Antrim's league campaign where everybody's singing their praises at the start. And then, could all change come the last 4 rounds because obviously Antrim not out of the woods yet themselves. But yeah, Offaly win for me.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'd fancy Offaly as well. I think at home, I think they should be too strong. Limerick just all has not looked right in Limerick football this year, unfortunately.
It's a real shame. It's a real shame.
It is a real shame. And you know what's an interesting point, actually? You were mentioning Mark Fitzgerald. Like, Mark Fitzgerald did get a slight tune out of Limerick a little bit in the Tailteann Cup when he was in charge there. And he obviously, I think he wanted to stay on. He didn't get the position, and now he's gone to Clare. And you just look at it and think, if he had been kept on with Limerick, would Limerick still be in this same situation?
It's difficult to know. It's certainly a spicy one because of the local rivalry between the two counties. The reality is it goes back to, it is sad to see because they really did, make a lot of progress under Billy Lee and getting up to Division 2 and, making great progress, towards a Munster final and everything like that. But it just, that's where it peaked, unfortunately. And it feels like now they're falling like a stone right back to square one.
Absolutely. And last but not least, in Division 3, Antrim versus Wicklow. And I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll throw the league table back up because this game has a lot of permutations potentially. As you'll see there, right down near the bottom of the table, Wicklow are 7th with 2 points. Antrim are 5th with 4 points. But a Wicklow win would see them finish above Antrim on the head-to-head record, provided Offaly were not to draw with Limerick. Otherwise, then Wicklow could still potentially go down on the basis of points difference. Yeah, you're looking at it there and thinking Antrim, a bit of a mad scenario this, because they won the opening 2 games in Division 3, and you were thinking, there's no way they're ever going to get relegated. Most people were thinking of them more so in the promotion chase, but obviously, a number of defeats in a row, 4 defeats on the spin, and here it is. Wicklow have a chance. They will have to go to Corrigan Park, which a difficult place to go to, especially in this type of a game. But could Oisin McConville's men pull off the great escape?
It would be a hell of an escape if they were to pull it off. But like Wicklow have a track record of doing this when their backs were against the wall in 2022, I believe it was. They beat Cavan.
21, I think.
No, 2021. Sorry, apologies. 2021, when their backs were against the wall, they beat Cavan to keep themselves up. I remember that because that was the COVID league, where the divisions were split into north and south. But like, I just remember thinking, how on earth have they managed to stay up by beating Cavan of all teams, the team that everybody picked at the time to go straight back up to Division 2. So they have this in the locker of producing last gasp Hail Mary survivals, and they could do it again. Like it definitely isn't out of the realm of their possibilities. I would go with Antrim though, low key. I think Antrim have great forwards, the likes of Ryan Murray and Rory McCann and everything like that. And I think it is a game that we could see them put up a high tally and get the victory. But like for the amazing start that they made, I don't think Andy McEntee will be happy regardless that they've ended up in this position.
Yeah, it is kind of mad, all right, because I'm pretty sure last year they actually went into the final game in the league, actually having already stayed up. It feels like they were actually never in a battle to be relegated in this, in this season. But yeah, here they are going into the final game. It's just sort of ended up that way. But I would agree. I think Antrim at home should have enough. Like Wicklow are a bit of a mad team. Like they lost to Offaly by 25 points, and then they went out and beat Limerick a week later. So yeah, I do think there is a gap between Wicklow and Limerick and the rest of this division, in all honesty. And I do think Antrim will have enough at home to get over the line and get the job done. Division 4 looks a little bit mental going into the final round of games. You've got Laois sitting there on 10 points, 5 wins from 6, not exactly promoted just yet, albeit they are playing Waterford, so I do think Laois should be okay. You've got Wexford, Longford and Leitrim all with 8 points. Carlow have a slim chance at still getting promoted, but even with the fact that Longford and Wexford play each other, actually, I've just worked it out in my head. Carlow can't get promoted, so sorry, Carlow fans. You've got Tipperary in 6th with 4 points, London in 7th with 3 points. I suppose first of all, just to get it over and done with, Laois versus Waterford. No disrespect to Waterford here, but Laois are getting promoted. There's no other way about it.
I think Laois are on a one-way ticket out of the division. I was stunned that they lost to Leitrim. First of all, absolutely stunned. But you did call that one. I think, no way that Laois don't win this game.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think it would be a massive stretch and a massive shock if Waterford were to do it, but I don't think either one of us see it happening. Keane says here, Leitrim to beat Tipperary on Sunday in Carrick on Shannon, and every Leitrim fan will be hoping that Wexford can do us a favour by beating Longford.
That means Wexford go up, doesn't it?
I don't think so.
With the head-to-head?
Yeah, I think so, because it would be, Leitrim would be on 10 points, Wexford would be on 10 points. And then, I think Leitrim beat Wexford this year, so they
did. Ryan O'Rourke's penalty.
So they'd obviously jump above. But if Longford were to win, they wouldn't jump above Longford, obviously, because of the fact that Longford beat Leitrim. So, or even a draw could potentially do them, as well. But in saying that, Leitrim are home to Tipperary, you'd expect them to beat Tipperary?
It's a difficult one to know. Because Tipperary as well, brought Laois to an inch of their lives. Tipperary beat Longford. It's definitely not a cut and dry game, this. Leitrim have stumbled at the last hurdle, in promotion over the last couple of years. And this isn't a cut and dry one like people think it is. Tipperary still have the likes of Sean O'Connor. He's one of the most informed forwards around right now. they have very good players, Tip. They still have the likes of Stephen O'Brien and everything. It's a difficult game, more so than people think it is. And I wouldn't be shocked if Tipperary won it. Like, Leitrim definitely have a hell of a lot more riding on it, and they definitely want to win it more. And they have the likes of Ryan O'Rourke, who is in cracking form. I probably will lean towards Leitrim to win it. I do think Leitrim probably will win it by a point, but I genuinely mean a point, a last-minute winner. Like, I really think this is not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination, because Tip, it's like walking underwater, hoping that there's not like a crab there that'll snap your ankle. Like, Tip can grab you when you're least expecting it, and they're like Wexford in a sense. Like, you just don't know what version of them is going to turn up.
Yeah. No, I fancy Leitrim as well. I think at home, I think this might be a game where Leitrim pull away, like in the final 5-10 minutes, especially with Tip not having anything to play for. I think Leitrim could pull away and maybe win by 4 or 5. Aaron Brady says, come on, Leitrim as well. So, yeah, fair play to all the Leitrim fans tuning in here. And, yeah, look, I would like to see us get promoted. It would be great to see. In fairness, is it going to happen, though? That's the big question, because Wexford are playing Longford, and the only way it can happen is if Wexford beat Longford, or this game was a draw. Longford are coming in great form. Like, they started the league quite poorly with 2 defeats. They've won 4 on the bounce now. They are the informed team in the division. You feel like Wexford and Leitrim are very inconsistent. To be fair to Wexford, they've gone on a bit of a good run themselves as well recently. But what you reckon, Longford, can they win it and get promoted back to Division 3? First time of asking.
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say that Longford do it in a similar way to how Cavan did it a couple of years ago, where Cavan went up, but you weren't necessarily the most amazed or impressed by how they did it. I think Longford will probably win this game. Look, it's against the Wexford side that are in form. Wexford very much put Tipperary to the sword in very impressive fashion last week, but I don't think they do it again. I think Longford beat Wexford in this game. I know Wexford have home advantage, and all signs are in their favour, but I think Longford take this. Longford are, as you said, cracking form, 4 wins on the bounce. They've really turned it around from their very poor start, and I think they'll go up along with Leith.
Yeah, I fancy them as well. I mean, it would be the most Wexford thing ever to probably beat Longford and then not get promoted. The one time they have a bit of consistency and they win 5 out of 7 games, and then they still don't get promoted. You'd be wondering what on earth has happened there. But no, look, I think Longford will do it. I would like to see Leitrim go up, as I said. Predicted Leitrim at the start of the year to get promoted. I'm trying to get at least a few predictions right here. Because there's certainly been a lot of them that have been very, very
well,
bad.
If Longford win, that's my 2 up. Yeah. And actually, I'd be buzzing with that, because I predicted if I didn't get them all correct in the order, but if Longford and Laois go up from 4, Westmeath and Down go up from 3, and Armagh and Donegal go up from 2, I've got them all right.
There we go. We need to take.
So
I think
I didn't get it in the right order. I predicted Longford to top it, but
yeah, I think the main ones I got wrong were Division 1 and predicting Cork to get promoted. But look, we won't get into that. We'll save that for another day. There is one more game in Division 4. Obviously, is no meaning to a Carlow London very quickly. You'd expect Carlow to win. Yeah,
Carlow for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know. And London, to be fair, do tend to pull off the odd shocks and surprises every now and again, but you'd be very surprised to.
They seem to have lost a lot of the momentum this year. Like they haven't put up too much of a hassle to most teams.
Yeah. And unfortunately, yeah. Like, obviously, their only win came against Waterford. They did have a draw, I think, with Tipperary though, which they would have been happy with. But all in all, yeah, it hasn't quite gone the way that London would have hoped. In terms of player of the week, bet of the week, what would you be thinking from the weekend's games?
Bet of the week, like an outside bet, Clare to beat Down.
Yeah, I suppose that. Yeah, I haven't seen the odds on that, to be honest, but I would imagine Down would be slight favourites, considering they're at home. So, Yeah, I could take
And
that one.
player of the week. Difficult. Very difficult. I could see someone in, like, weirdly, I could see someone in the game like a Donegal Mead, but there's nothing going on it. I could see someone just doing their thing.
More than a hat trick or
Like
something.
an Oisin Gallen or like an Oran Doherty or someone that's a real confidence player just tearing it up in a game that doesn't really matter. But in sticking with the Clare theme, I think if Clare are to beat down, I think someone like an Emmett McMahon would be huge in them doing that. I think he's a very good shout. But yeah, push me on it. I'd say possibly an Ulton Kelm if Fermanagh beat Cavan.
It's a good shout, yeah.
Yeah, I'll go with him actually. Ulton Kelm.
There we go. Yeah, in terms of bet of the week for myself, I think I've played it a bit more safe this weekend, but I'll probably Monaghan to beat Mayo. Like, I don't really know what the odds are going into that. Mayo maybe might be more slightly favourites given the fact that Monaghan have been relegated, so maybe I'll go with that one. In terms of player of the week, I'm gonna go for Samuel Roy, maybe of Louth against Kildare. To turn it on there. Maybe someone like a Kieran Keenan as well could really turn it on there as well. But I think it's going to come from that match. Kildare have been very susceptible at the back, very vulnerable defensively. Louth need the victory. We saw the result they put up against Fermanagh. So yeah, I could see it happening. In fairness, last thing here, John says Wexford could make it very difficult for Longford, so Leitrim have a good chance and something to play for. Absolutely, John. That is a fair point. We'll wrap things up here with the football action. We'll be doing a watch along as well on Sunday. So anyone who wants to tune in, feel free. Obviously, plenty of games going on, so we'll be trying to keep everyone updated with the scores and hopefully have a few different guests on along the way. We'll have a look at the hurling semi-finals that are taking place this weekend. 2 games here to discuss. So we have Clare against Tipperary, Limerick against Kilkenny as well. I suppose firstly, looking at Limerick, Kilkenny, 2 sides very familiar with each other in terms of the league final last year. 2 sides very familiar with each other in terms of the All-Ireland over the last couple of seasons. Limerick are coming in like Limerick have been really. They've rotated their team quite heavily, but they've still managed to keep a lot of their momentum. Unbeaten, obviously, as well. Managed to dig out a draw last time out against Galway. Whereas Kilkenny on the other side of things have looked fairly decent as well. What would you be thinking going into this one?
Difficult to tell. Very, very difficult to tell. Limerick actually had the first blip of the season in not beating Galway. Obviously, I know it was away from home. It was not going to be an easy assignment, but they didn't come out with the win, which is something that we don't usually see from Limerick. They usually win every game that they're in. They've been brilliant in the league campaign, and they've also added like so much to their potential options. Like Cathal O'Neill looks grand in the half-back line. Colin Coughlin has got some more minutes into him. You've got the likes of Donegal O'Dowd, Shane O'Brien, Adam English. They've all got more minutes into him in the forward line. You've got Fergal O'Connor there, cornerback, who looks like he's been part of that team for years. Like, they really, really, polished up some extra options in the team. And they're going into this championship, actually, you could argue, more well-rounded and stronger than we've seen them in a long, long time, which is terrifying when you think, like, last season, for example, players they were missing, injuries like to the likes of Declan Hannon, etc., were huge. And this season, if Hannon can get back in time for championship, it'll just be absolutely incredible, that the team that they're going to have together, if they get everybody available, everybody fit, everybody singing off the same hymn sheet, it's going to be pretty hard to stop. And this season as well in the league, they've definitely carried the same energy on. I think Kylie might be tempted by the slam dunk, as in, like, win the league and win the 5 in a row. Win league, win Munster, win 5 in a row. What a way that would be to wrap it up and say that you're the best in the business. I think Limerick win this game. I think, look, Kilkenny have been coming very, very strong. the form of the likes of Owen Cody and Adrian Mullen has been very impressive. Billy Drennan's been very impressive in the league as well, which is, great to see for Kilkenny. He's a player with massive potential. But I think Limerick win this.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. All right, like obviously TJ Reid's back in for Kilkenny now as well. We know the power and strength of players that they have. Owen Cody's obviously been in great form as well. John Donnelly's always been a player I've been very impressed with as well. Like it's like a lot of Limerick and Kilkenny games over the last few years. You'd expect it to be neck and neck. You'd expect it to go the distance, be flip of a coin, going down the final 20 minutes. But as you said, like what's interesting with Limerick is that they've introduced fresher players like Donegal O'Dowling, one of the top scorers across the entirety of the league so far this season.
Top scorer from play as well. All 315 has come from play.
I mean, like that's because that's saying something as well. Because like the
big shout out to Matthew. That's his stat.
There we go. There we are. Yeah, you know where you found it. But yeah, like yeah, like because the thing is as well, even there'll be other Limerick players who are regular starters who might maybe come back in for this. And I think they'll look at it and think, I need to cement my position back into the side. And again, I know there's been so many comparisons between the Limerick, domination and Dublin's 6 in a row spell. But it is very similar because Dublin had this a lot of the time throughout when they were winning league titles consistently throughout, that spell as well, especially, 2017, 18, 19. Dublin were very dominant in the league in those years, in 2016 as well, mainly because of the fact that you'd introduce, a few fresh players and they just, they'd slot in so brilliantly, and then you'd have better players to come back later on in the year as well. So I think the same is happening with Limerick. Like they're fine. Like Cathal O'Neill's becoming more and more of a starter now, in my opinion. And Donegal O'Dowling as well could very well be a starter for Limerick come championship time.
Yeah, he's ruthless, man. Like he gives off very similar vibes to kind of Eddie Brennan, like that type that like he just sniffs out a goal and just bang, like he just has an eye for a goal that I haven't seen in a while now. And like the 2 goals he stuck away against Dublin were just ruthless, man. Just straight into the back, and he got one of them after 15 seconds. Like who goes for a goal after 15 seconds? Players that definitely have an eye for it is the answer. And O'Dowling is certainly one of those. You're right. It's when a team has players that are fighting for positions, it means that whoever gets in has earned that spot, and they're going to, bring the levels. Like, I mean, you look at Terron as well. 2021 is a brilliant example, because Terron in 2021 also give you the example of what happens when that drops off. So they had an unbelievable squad. And I remember, do you remember Terron won the All-Ireland football, and everybody was saying like, this looks like it could be a dynasty for Terron. And what happened was they didn't actually lose the starters, but they lost the subs. They lost the lads that were just behind the starters. They lost the Ronan O'Neills, the Tiernan McCanns, the Rory Brennans, the Conor McKennas. Conor McKenna was a starter actually, but they like players that were just behind the starters that they lost. Paul Donaghy was another good example of that. Conor McCalliskey. When they lost those type of lads, it meant that the pressure on the lads that were starting was not the same. And that meant that Dooher and Logan couldn't drop a Darren McCurry or couldn't drop a Frank Burns if they weren't performing, because they didn't have an option. Like Kieran McGeary and Conor Myler's form fell off a cliff, but they had to keep playing them because they didn't have as good options on the bench as they used to. Whereas Limerick, look at the players that Limerick are taking off in the championship games last season. They took off Keane Lynch. They took off Gearóid Hegarty. Like, that is unheard of in other teams. Those lads are the type of players that they're good enough that you just leave them on, no matter how bad they're playing, because they can always just do something like that. But for Limerick, they have a good enough panel that if you're not bringing it in every minute of the game, you're off. Because we have someone on the bench who's good enough to do it. And we have 6 or 7 different options for your position. So they have a frighteningly deep talent pool. And that's why even seeing Cathal O'Neill move back to the half-back line, it's like they're finding ways to incorporate all their best players as well. Barry Nash started as a forward, now he's nailed on at cornerback. Kyle Hayes was centre forward, now he's wing back. they're finding ways to slot their best players into the starting 15. And Cathal O'Neill being tried out at halfback for me is a very clear indication that Kiley wants to get him into the starting 15, just wherever he can put him. Because Lynch is going to take centre forward. Hegarty and Morrissey are going to be in either side. Flanagan, Gallan and Casey are going to be inside. So there's no room for O'Neill in there. But Kiley wants to get him in one way or another. So I think that's why we could see him there, especially if Declan Hannon doesn't make it back in time.
Yeah, it's the mentality within Limerick as well. I think that's so impressive. Like I think players slot in there and they know exactly what needs to be done. You know, it's like you've got your starting 15 and then the team probably that's playing underneath in terms of training when you're doing AVB games and everything else. That team is in line very similarly to the first team, if that makes sense. So I think when players slot in there, they know their roles inside and out. And I think the mentality within the group as well, I think is so powerful. And I think we've saw that on multiple occasions when they've been able to dig it out when they haven't, when they've been losing games and everything else. Keane says Kilkenny to win this clash against the All-Ireland champions. Look, I think for Kilkenny, it's a massively important game because, the next time Kilkenny play Limerick this year, if they do play them again this year, will be in the championship. And it's probably going to be a semi-final, maybe again another final. Limerick have obviously beaten Kilkenny in the last two All-Ireland finals, in the league final last year as well. You feel like Kilkenny, they have to be gunning for this because they need a win, a big win versus Limerick. And it would stand to them brilliantly if they beat Limerick going into the championship, because at least then if they were to play Limerick further on down the year, they would at least have that behind them.
It does, because it just gives you a confidence that you can beat them. Because I remember one of the things that's the craziest stat is that, like, say, for example, bringing it back to Dublin again, for example, I remember there was some stat that came out that I remember Joe Sheridan saying the Chase and Sam documentary, like how important the 2010 win was for me. It's, like, psychologically, it was like there was only 3 or 4 lads in the panel that had actually ever beaten Dublin. Like in anything. Because that is absolutely baffling when you think about how then you can convince yourself that you can when it matters the most. If Limerick haven't been beaten by Kilkenny, if Kilkenny haven't done it against Limerick, there's dwindling, connections to that 2019 starting lineup year on year. TJ, like a lot of key players in that 2019 team are gone now. Like there's no more Pádraig Walsh, there's no more Conor Brown. Like he's stepped away from the panel and been a big loss at that. There's no more Colin Fennelly. Like players that were big players in that team aren't there anymore. And that's why when those players step away and you consistently then lose to Limerick, like you look at the league game last year, Limerick wiped the floor with Kilkenny in that league game. So then how can you have the confidence to beat them when it all is on the line, when you haven't been able to beat them when nothing's on the line? So I think it's massively important that Kilkenny win this. But again, the way Limerick are playing right now and the players that they have, I back them going in against any hurling team that has ever played the game. I've never seen a team this good, Aaron. Like they're so good.
Could you argue maybe though that like they're not at that standards just yet though, because of some of the key players who've rotated in now?
You could argue that, yeah, but again, it's a very good comparison that you made with the Dublin team, and another team that they're always compared to, and rightfully so, because Kilkenny in the late 2000s were I think the greatest team of all time. Cork as well, obviously Cork's 4 in a row has to get a mention as well. And I see it's very difficult to compare those teams because it's a completely different game. It's a different time. It's a different standard to compare to. For their eras, they were the best team of their eras. No question about it. If Kilkenny were to play Limerick now, it's impossible to say who's going to win because the game has changed so much. Like, the reality is Kilkenny won an All-Ireland hurling title by scoring a goal and 16 points against Cork in 2006. That doesn't win you a half against Limerick. Like, do you know what I mean? Let alone a full match. So the reality is the standards have gone up with Limerick, but maybe the Kilkenny lads would have jumped up. And when you look at someone like a TJ Reid, he was still playing in 2008 and he's still one of the best players in Ireland now. So
yeah,
who's to say that Kilkenny wouldn't win this game if they were, somehow transported to now and given the modern game and given the modern trainings and everything like that and the modern diet, and they were as big as the Limerick lads. Like, who's to say that they don't have the better hurlers? But I'm saying the reason I always look at it is I think Limerick's path to an All-Ireland is more difficult than Kilkenny's path to an All-Ireland. Kilkenny had to get out of a Leinster Championship that didn't have Galway, that had a Wexford on the slide, that had an Offaly on the slide, and that had a Dublin that was still very much in the rebuilding process. It didn't have any threat for Kilkenny to the Leinster title. So they had to get through that, and they were in the All-Ireland semi-final immediately. Whereas Limerick have to get through 4 absolute crazy games in Munster every time. And then the Munster final just to get to the semi-final. So that's why I'm saying there's more standing in Limerick. There has been more standing in Limerick's way. But Kilkenny, like in that example there, Kilkenny could always up the gears. Limerick can always up the gears. I always fancy Limerick to take whatever game they're in. And same applies to this one.
And what are you thinking for Limerick then, in terms of a points margin?
4 points.
4 points, yeah. It's a hard one, really. Like, I do look at it and think Kilkenny, they just need... I think the quality is there. The players are most certainly there, but I do agree with you. I think Limerick, they do seem to always find a way, and even with rotating players and everything else. And look, to be fair, we saw a lot more of the key players come back in the last couple of weeks, like Aaron Glan and Cian Lynch and a few others as well. So probably Limerick might, they probably will not go, to the absolute strongest. And look, Kilkenny probably won't either as well. But I think Limerick will be more or less there. And I do agree. I do fancy Limerick to come through. I'm going to say by 2 points. And I think it's going to be another one of them games as well, where Limerick are probably 3-4 points down in the second half. And then with a flip of a switch, they go on an incredible run and then topple the Cats in the process. The other semi-final is Clare versus Tipperary. Obviously, both of these two sides have been in impressive form as well. And from a Clare perspective, likes of Mark Rogers, it looked very good there. Gerard O'Connor, on the other hand side, has been an absolutely flying form for Tipperary. It's a huge game, this, because, again, like, chance to get to a league final. You feel like both of these two sides do need a trophy, in particular Clare. What's the thinking going into this?
Oh, it's very, very interesting, this one. Like, Clare definitely need a trophy to kind of capitalise on the generation that they've had. It was funny, I was talking to Jer Gregan, who was on my podcast a few times. I was talking to him and I was saying it's funny. I actually think that this Clare team over the last 2 years, you could argue was better than the team that won the All-Ireland for Clare. And you could make the point that I think that there's a few All-Ireland since then, like the 2015 one. I think Clare beat that Kilkenny side. In 2016, I think Clare win that one. It's really, really interesting because Clare have been so good over the last 2 years, but Limerick have just been that little bit better. And Clare very much are giving off the same kind of aura, or have anyway, over the last 2 years. Have given off the same kind of aura as Mayo in the football. That, like, you had a good team, but you had that good team when somebody else just had a little bit of a better team. And I think if you had to put that Clare team into any other era, I think they win 2 or 3. It's just Limerick are around now. Like, it's so hard to say this, but I think they need a trophy. I think that they will go for this win. Cahill with Tipperary, it's interesting because, like, all the talk, pre-season about, potential unhappy people in the camp, it's faded away. And now, here they are, in a league semi-final. I would probably lean towards Clare, though. I do think Clare probably take this one.
Yeah, I think so as well. Like, at home as well. Like, yeah, I'd fancy Clare to come through it. I think it is an interesting one. Like with Clare, as you said, like they've had multiple big games in the last couple of years where they haven't been able to get over the line. Like you think back, obviously, to those games against Tipperary as well, like which have been absolutely massive, or those games against Kilkenny, should I say, which have been massive. But yeah, like with Aidan McCarthy in flying form, Mark Rogers as well. I would fancy Clare at home against Tipperary, in fairness. But in saying that, Tipperary have looked very strong themselves. Gerard O'Connor has been very impressive this year. Well, look, I suppose we'll go ahead and wrap this one up here. Seamus, thank you very much for coming on. Anyone who was watching, cheers. Anyone for tuning in. If you could hit the like button and subscribe, share this out to your friends and family or anyone you think might be interested. And until the next one, we will catch you all soon.